Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I'm going to be talking about Legion Season 3, Episode 5. It is called Chapter 24. So, this felt like a big episode, actually. Oh, full spoilers for the episode, by the way. I should say that. I should also tell you that these Legion reviews are sponsored by one of our patrons, Cindy Palacios, so thank you to her. But yeah, so this is a big episode. We have almost one big set piece taking up the back half of the episode. Obviously, we have some stuff before that. Hell, even the opening is kind of interesting, where Clark's boyfriend, who also works for Division, is in a truck with some Vermilion on motorbikes in front of it, some guards on the truck itself. He's in a conversation with Clark to begin with, and then David, who of course declared war last episode, basically shows up, and his mission is to try and find out where they're keeping Switch, because he wants Switch back so they can go and do some time travel shenanigans and fix things. And he just stands there on the road. The two Vermilion on the motorbikes speed up, and he just like turns them to parts. They just shatter into lots of metal parts. And it's not. I mean, it's not the dusting from like Avengers, but it's like almost the metal part equivalent of that. Where he just makes it happen. They don't even stand a chance. And then he comes on the truck, and all the guards, like, he puts someone on the wall. We've seen him do this before, of course, in Season 1 and various other moments, where he's put people on the wall by accident. Although I guess technically that was Sid, but, we've seen it done before. And we also get, like, this one last guard who is, like, teleported, or, like, maybe not teleport. What's it? Like strained through the bottom of the truck, and then we see the blood splatter on the road as it drives past. I don't know, it was a really interesting visual. Fun little sequence, and he gets to Clark's boyfriend, whose name I don't know, which is why he's always going to be Clark's boyfriend. And he wants to know where they're keeping Switch. And he's like, well, I've been trained not to let that information out. He's been trained not to, think it so he won't find it. And David responds, well, we'll just have to erase that part of your brain. And he erases, he keeps erasing his memory until he gets to the point where he finds the training and erases that. Essentially erasing everything, about Clark and everything else. It's kind of a sad, like, really, like, diabolical thing to do to someone. And although somehow doesn't get erased the knowledge of the location. I guess he was able to just avoid erasing that as he was doing it, and finds out about the airship, that it exists at least. Doesn't know where it is quite yet, but knows it's an airship. And of course, the big twist here with this is that Farouk actually later on in the episode kind of calls them in and lets them know where they are, because they've got this plan to take the ship into space. Apparently, it's space ready. They can take it into space. But the plan being is that's out with David's capabilities because, it's in space, basically. So, neat plan, but Farouk kind of double crosses them and brings David in. Although I suspect it's because he thinks he's got more of an even playing field up here, and he thinks he can beat David. Not that he clearly cares about the collateral damage, because obviously a lot of people get killed before that showdown happens. Before we get to this stuff, though, we do have to talk about Lenny. We have to talk about Lenny's apparent death. Now, admittedly, because we're about to do more time travel, very good chance that anyone who died in this episode is fair game to return via time shenanigans. But Lenny does, still living with the trauma of what happened and living with her child that grew up and died in front of her. David makes like most of the people at the party disappear, the cult. And someone comes, one of the others who were outside comes and says, "But did you kill them all?" He's like, "No, they're not dead. They're just somewhere else." I don't know if I believe him. Honestly, the way he's been acting, like, I don't know if I believe him at all. But Lenny, calls David out on his attitude, the way he thinks, the way he's been acting, and then kills herself. She stabs herself in the neck, and it's a pretty brutal death. And you almost hope that this will be the thing that finally lets David see the way he is, and what he's doing to people by being this god complex figure that he is. But sure enough, Farouk calls him in, and we get this extended sequence. The whole, back 20-25 minutes of the episode is David and his encounters with various people on the ship. First things first, bunch of guards get vaporized or blinked out of existence. We actually see them later on. They're actually just floating in space after this, because that's what he also does to Clark. Clark realizes something. In fact, Clark's actually sitting watching like old home footage of his boyfriend, and it's like kind of heartbreaking. Like, his boyfriend, while alive, has no idea who he is now. When I say he, I mean Clark, but he also doesn't know who he himself is either. He's completely, he's a blank slate who's going to have to be taught from scratch again. And Clark senses something's wrong. He reaches for his gun, but when he picks it up, it's a rubber duck. Because David's powers, right? And he says, "I should have killed you when I first met you." Which is a nice little throwback. I thought there was a nice few throwbacks in this back to the start of the show, because the start of the show, of course, that big pilot, we had Clark interviewing David in the swimming pool. It was a whole thing. And it really felt like it called back to that. And it's like, Clark in a way like saw how dangerous he was, and everything he's done since then. Like, this is how bad it's gone. All of his power, his power trip, as it were. And he throws Clark into space. He teleports him out of space, and Clark is dead. So again, we're killing a lot of characters this episode, and obviously we only have 3 after this for the whole show, but we've got time travel shenanigans, so we'll see. But we get a great fight scene actually, where Kerry is fighting the knife-wielding cult members, because she had that kind of stare down with them before, back in like episode 2. This is like her like taking out her swords and going to town, and we get to see some of it. Vermilion and Ptonomy are watching it on the screen, and they go into like a chamber, this little like thing to like basically a security lockdowns to protect them. But they're watching this fight, and this fight's, what we see of it's great, and obviously it culminates a little bit later when David and Sid get kind of stumble onto it, as it were. But yeah, maybe the bigger scene here is David and Sydney, where Sid sees David, and it feels like, I think the whole scene I was expecting she was playing him. Like, she was going out of her way to make him feel more comfortable so that she could get away with something. It turned out her plan was to try and switch bodies, and being with his body and having his power have a chance of defeating him. But because she's like, "Oh, so many are dead," and David's like, "Oh, they're not really dead, because once I fix everything, none of this will have happened." And she kind of leads to a point where she's like, "Yeah, so does that mean that we won't happen either? Like, we'll never fall in love because you'll change everything?" And he kind of agrees that that's what will happen. And she said, "Oh, that's sad. Will it hurt being blinked out of existence because I'll be overwritten with a new timeline?" And he's trying to console her, and she's playing the upset girlfriend. She's playing the vulnerable character to lure him into this false sense of security. And then she touches his face, and he kind of realizes just at the last second what she's doing, but it's too late. But we see inside his mind, or her mind, in his body, but she's in his body and she's in his mind, and lots of David's kind of try to take control back from her. And they just keep saying, "We are Legion, we are Legion." So that's a neat thing. In fact, is that the first time they've used the title of the show in that way? I don't remember them using it before, but I could be wrong. But so that neat scene, and David and Sid's body is all kind of weak, even though there's obviously still some of them left in his own body. And Sid and David's body is just dragging her through the halls of the ship. Distracts some of the. At this point, Kerry's killed a lot of the cult members, but it's she's kind of beat up at this point. Sid and David's body distracts them long enough for her to just swipe them off in the back. It's kind of a nice little cool moment. But ultimately she's like, you have to kill me. Kill David right now while I'm in his body while we've got a chance. And Kerry's hesitant because she's like, what you're inside him, wouldn't that kill you? And she says she'll jump back. I don't believe her. I don't think she has, because we've never seen her have control of when she's able to jump back. It's kind of just a timer. It's kind of just a set thing where eventually she will jump back. And So I think she's saying that to make Kerry feel better about it, and is about to kill him. However, he takes control back in his head and then is able to stop Kerry and just blasts her back down the hall in the ship. And yeah, so David kind of, he's winning here. He's mopped. He's went through the building. He's killed so many. He comes to the cockpit to get Switch, and this is where Farouk shows up, and they're ready to go down. He monologues a little bit. He's like, "Oh, it's kind of genius. We're up here where you're kind of trapped. Your powers aren't as good up here in space." And unfortunately for him, though, Switch actually draws her portal on his back or right behind him, and he's sucked into the time between times, or the space between times. The static, still silent shots that we got last episode, which was nice to see again. That was a neat little reminder of that. But ultimately, she's like, "Wait, did you kill everyone?" And he's like, "Well, most." And she's like, "Doesn't that bother you?" And he's like, and again, he reiterates, "No, once we change everything, none of this will happen." So while there's some logic to that, he is very sociopathic right now. He is very much uncaring about what he's doing. He's uncaring about the people that he's affecting, and he's coming off as a basically a bit of a psycho. In all honesty, very hard to sympathize with him. And if he succeeds, maybe he'll create a better version of himself that will never have to be this way. Maybe the version of David that grows up will never have to go down this path. But we don't know what his plan is, because the Switch says, "Are we going back to your mother again?" And he says, "No, I've got a new plan," and we don't get to see it. The episode ends with them jumping into the time portal, and that's it. Of course, not to gloss over the weird musical number that happens before that, where they start singing, and it cuts around all the other characters singing in a montage, including the dead characters. I mean, Clark's in space singing, so it's a very kind of surreal scene. I mean, let's be honest, this is my least favourite scene of the episode. I don't think it accomplishes anything. This is the self-indulgent side I know Holly showing through. And don't get me wrong, like, he's had worse, but I'm not a fan of musical numbers by any means. I didn't really get much out of this. Lenny's singing, everyone else is singing, and I get it, just building up. It's like all of them getting their goodbye almost before he goes back to the past, and because I assume next episode we'll be back in the past again for maybe the whole episode. And then do we have like 2 left to like explore what the changes are, or is it more in the past? And then we just get 1 episode exploring what the new world's like. Is this how he destroys the planet? Is this how he causes the apocalypse? Or do they, stop him somehow, some way? I don't know. Is it another time traveler? I have no idea. But I mean, that was where the episode ended, and I think this episode is one of the best in the season. I think this one, the last one, the first one are my favorites, and I think it's because they've been very focused on progressing what the plot is, to the point where like you could really condense episodes probably 2 and 3 into 1, I imagine, and the season would probably flow a lot better for it. But I think this episode, it really goes the furthest it's ever done to show just how powerful David is and how scary his powers are, and how he just like kills people left and right, and the fact that he kills directly Clark by just teleporting him outside, and obviously all the stuff in the opening, and how cruel he was by taking the memories, but just how much emotional sort of pain that he's dealing with Lenny. The idea that Lenny gets to a point where she's committing suicide, it kind of shows the emotional abuse that he's putting people through and that he's inflicting on people. And Sid obviously is another example of that, where she suffered abuse from him, and that's why or at least that was a helpful inspiration for her to get on this side and be determined to take him down, stop him from doing what he's doing, and can see the path that he's on. So he very much was a horror movie villain in this episode. Except he's the egotistical, man-child version of it. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He's convinced himself he's doing the right thing. But he is just this terrifying force of nature that can't be reckoned with by anyone else. Farouk has a chance, maybe. But we're at the point now where he's embraced his godlike powers to such an extreme degree that, no one else has a chance. It's not even it's not even close. But no, I liked how focused this episode was. I liked how it was mostly the assault on the ship and how it took its time dealing with each element of that, kind of one by one. A little bit of setup, but the scenes, we had the opening scene with the truck and the boyfriend, and then we had the scene with Lenny, and then we had the big taking over the ship scene. A couple of little things in between there, but that's ultimately what this episode boils down to, and I think that benefits it. It benefits it and keeps it focused. It made it feel like the siege on the ship was worthy of the cliffhanger from last week. When it ended last week's episode with, oh, that means war. This felt like this was David going to war. And they didn't have a chance. They didn't stand a fragment of a chance. And that makes them terrifying. So that's good. So that was a pretty good episode. Yeah. Didn't like the singing at the end. But that's about it. So I'm excited to see. Hopefully this is better than the last episode spent in the past. Hopefully there's more direct things that they're going to do, which would lend itself to the question of why last time there were basically just voices and ghosts and couldn't be there physically, as opposed to maybe next time maybe they will be there physically, which would make it far more interesting. But we'll see what they do. I don't want to make that complaint until they've actually done it. Because they might not. Maybe they'll handle it another way. Maybe we'll get another episode. Maybe they'll do a thing where they just go into like episode 1 of season 1 and just kind of explore that and do like a Back to the Future 2 thing where they're affecting things that we've already seen, and we'll see them in an episode that we've already been in. Now I realize there was probably a preview for the next episode that would probably tell you if it was that or not. I don't watch the previews. I go in cold. I watch the episode and that's it. So I'm curious though. I'm curious to see what they do. But that is episode 5 of season 3. So obviously I didn't let this go a whole week and then have to double up, so that was nice, unlike last time. So thank you very much for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. You can of course support everything we do over at Patreon, patreon.com/MaileFuzzTV. Of course, like Cindy Palacios, who sponsors these at one of the higher tiers, but you can actually support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses, some extras, and get some early stuff. So go and have a look and see what you fancy. Other than that, check out other content we have. We will be starting Mindhunter Season 2 soon. We'll be starting Dear White People Season 3 soon. I'll be starting Glow Season 3 soon. We're still working through Handmaid's Tale Season 3. There's a lot of stuff going on right now TV-wise. The Boys is hitting Amazon actually today at the time of recording. So we're going to be looking at that. Whether or not we like it enough to review the whole thing is another question, but we're definitely be checking out the first episode and seeing how it is. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?